So this is something that I think I would refer everyone to if you're a budding cancer research scientist. So this is a go-to read. This is a paper that was published in 2000. It's the Hallmarks of Cancer by Bob Weinberg and Douglas Hanahan. I was lucky enough to actually meet Bob Weinberg in a conference back when I was in Finland. So I was kind of starstruck as well. And so I think that was like, okay, I really need to pursue cancer research. And so this, they proposed basically 6 hallmarks of abilities. So basically characteristics that a normal cell will have to acquire that defines, that dictates them to transform into a cancer cell. And so this was published in 2000. And because of the efforts and the breadth of research in the last 3 years, this has been updated now, 2011. They've added 4 new hallmarks of cancer. So if in 2000, it was like, cells need to sustain the proliferative signaling. They need to really divide and things like that. We'll touch on this and I'll explain a little bit more about this later on. So in 2011, because of more research, more kind of efforts from labs, they've added more hallmarks of cancer. And then in 2022, if I move again, they've added more as well. And so they've more updates on the hallmarks of cancer. And so if I review all of this today, I think we'll be here for like months, because this in itself is like a module in like a university course. So we won't do that, but we'll try and review 2 of them. So one hallmark we'll review is sustaining proliferative signaling, ano ba yon? And then activating invasion metastasis. So this is what I was talking about earlier, yung mga cells na parang they acquire these legs and feet and then they want to move away from the tumor and spread. And so how did they acquire that kind of characteristic? So if I move, so first we'll review the first hallmark of cancer is how to sustain the proliferative signaling. So here on the top left is a bit more complicated. So I'm going to try and simplify this one here. So this is a cell, as I'm sure you would all recognize. So a cell will have a nucleus, and a nucleus will dictate how the cell behaves to divide and grow. So a cell will usually have on the cell surface receptors. So para siyang mga antenna, and then they receive signals from the outside, and then they will transmit those signals into these proteins inside the cell, and then ultimately magsisend ng signal sa nucleus to direct the cell to divide and grow. So that's what happens in a normal cell. Very healthy, and they kind of maintain this state of homeostasis. So homeostasis is a kind of self-regulatory state of the cell to maintain balance. But then what happens in cancer? Medyo naging crazy sila, di ba? So this is a cancer cell. So this normal cell, and this is cancer cell. So I'll try to talk to you what happens and what makes what enables them to grow like uncontrollably. So here, if you can see, I'm gonna click yan. Firstly, we'll talk about overexpression of the receptors. So sa normal cell, if you can see itong mga antenna na ito, let's say, for example, dalawa lang sila. So in a cancer cell, you can have an overexpression of these receptors. From 2, you can have thousands to millions of this. So in effect, pag marami kang antenna, di marami kang signals. So you have, you can receive more signals to grow. So that's what happens with cancer. Another hallmark is this, what we call autocrine signaling. So in a normal cell, they will rely on these growth factors. Ito yung mga messages from external environment. But in a cancer cell, they have devised a way na they can make their own growth factors. So basically, they're self-reliant na sila. So they will synthesize, they will make these growth factors, release them, and then that's going to be the message for the antenna, yung mga receptors nila. And so basically, yeah, it's self-regulating, self-sustaining. So that's one hallmark as well. That's how they maintain, how they keep growing. And then, And then another one is this disruption of the negative feedback loop. So what does that mean? So usually if cancer is, my growth factor, my signal na let's grow, and then the nucleus will also send a signal back to this proteins to switch off. Kasi that's how it should be. Like you can, so may negative feedback loop, but in cancer you actually lose this negative feedback loop. So that's another kind of hallmark. And then another one is ligand independent activation. So there are certain mutations in the receptor that perhaps, iti-change nila yung shape ng receptor, so they're no longer responsive sa mga growth factors na ito na nakalutang dito. And so kind of like hyperactivation of these receptors. So again, pag hyperactivated ng receptors, they constantly fire these signals sa loob ng cell, and again, that's gonna dictate the cells to grow uncontrollably. And then finally, another one is the deregulated signaling circuitry. So again, pwede ring magka-mutations itong mga messengers dito sa loob. They can, and sometimes they no longer become independent. They become independent from the receptor. So they can just be hyperactivated as well. So again, that's another kind of hallmark of cancer. And then another hallmark I wanted to talk about is the activation of migration, invasion, and metastasis. But before we go to details of that, this is just a kind of brief schematic to show you how cancer spreads. So as you know, you have the primary tumor. The main cause of mortality of cancer is when they spread to distant organs, metastasize, and that's usually like causing the high morbidity of cancer. So how the cancer spreads. So this is let's say the primary tumor of the cancer. So what they need to do is they have to enter the bloodstream. So to what you call it, invade the bloodstream, and then they have to travel along the bloodstream. It's a very hostile environment. Maraming traffic, blood cells, immune cells traveling. So they really have to survive this busy road, and then eventually leave that bloodstream and then hone into the distant sites. So they have to do this, have to go from the primary tumor site, papasok sa bloodstream, and then go outside and then spread to a distant site. So that's how a tumor spreads. And so this is what happens on like a cellular level, and it's another hallmark of cancer. So again, this is the complicated version, but I'll try and simplify this for you guys. So again, here in blue cells, so these are the normal cells, and then in red here are the cancer cells. So in the blue cells, again, nice shape, nice little nucleus, and you have these what we call cell-to-cell adhesion molecules. They're called cadherins. And so, nice and attached, they like to be close to each other. And then what happens pag cancer, they want to metastasize and invade to the distant sites. Firstly, so they lose these cell-to-cell adhesions, so the cadherin. So actually, they down-regulate their expression of these proteins called cadherin. So they're no longer like, nicely, cozy, attached to each other. And then they also start expressing these receptors. They're called integrins. So these are in blue, yung parang hooks dyan. So these enable them to actually kind of be more sticky and bind to their environment. So it's like, as I said earlier, they gain these legs and feet, so they move a little bit more. And then they form these focal adhesions. So these are like the pointy things here. So again, it's like hands and feet, and invadopoias as well. So ultimately enabling the cancer cell to be able to move. And so this is what happens. And then they also start expressing enzymes. They're called metalloproteases. And so what does that do? So these enzymes will degrade this basement membrane. So if you imagine yung picture kanina, so they will start to degrade this. And then, so that's, para makapasok sila sa bloodstream and then move to distant site. So these are just a few. It's not like, it's a more complicated process, but I hope you appreciate that it's it's a dynamic process, and it's a hostile environment, and so cancer cells really have to go through a lot just to metastasize. So yeah, it's a tough world out there for cancer cells.